Hello. Whatever time you're watching this, I hope you're having a good day. Today I'm going to talk about a very famous sermon John Wesley gave. He titled it The Almost Christian. He gave this sermon on July 25th in 1741 at St. Mary's, Oxford, before the university. And it is an interesting sermon, as you can tell by the title. He opens by explaining what he considers an almost Christian. And he spends a bit of time talking about the heathen, non-Christians. Remember, this is 1741. And he talked about how they can be honest, they can be caring, they can be giving, and they can live by the moral codes that their society has set up, and they are an almost Christian. But he saves both barrels and unloads them on those who call themselves a Christian. I'm going to read a little bit of his sermon. I apologize ahead of time if I flub things. I'm going to be reading it off a teleprompter I have set up behind the camera. So, and this will take a tiny bit of time, but here we go. This is where he starts talking about the almost Christians. Almost thou persuaded me to be a Christian. Acts 26:28. There have been many in every age and nation who are almost persuaded to be Christians. But seeing it avails nothing before God to go only thus far, it highly imports us to consider first what is implied in being almost. Second, what in being altogether a Christian. A second thing implied in the being almost a Christian is having a form of godliness, of that godliness which is prescribed in the gospel of Christ. The having the outside of a real Christian. Accordingly, almost Christian does nothing which the gospel forbids. He taketh not the name of God in vain. He blesseth and curseth not. He sweareth not at all, but his communication is yea, yea, nay, nay. He profanes not the day of the Lord, nor suffers it to be profaned, even by the stranger within his gates. He not only avoids all actual adultery, fornication, and uncleanness, but every word or look that either directly or indirectly tends thereto. Nay, and all the idle words, abstaining both from detraction, backbiting, tale-bearing, evil speaking, and from all foolish talking and jesting. He abstains from wine, wherein is excess, from reveling. Gluttony he avoids, as much as in him lies all strife and contention, continually endeavoring to live peaceably with all men. And if he suffers wrong, he avenges himself not. Remember now, he is talking about the almost Christian. Neither returns evil for evil. He is no railer, no brawler, no scoffer, either at the fault or infirmities of his neighbor. He does not willingly wrong, hurt, or grieve any man. And now in doing good, he does not confine himself to cheap and easy offenses of kindness, but labors and suffers for the profit of many, that by all means he may help some, in spite of toil or pain. Whatsoever his hand findeth to do, he doeth with his might. Again, we're talking about the almost Christian right now, folks. Whether it be for his friends or for his enemies, for the evil or for the good, for being not slothful in this or in any business, as he hath opportunity, he doeth good, all manner of good, to all men and to their souls, as well as their bodies. He reproves the wicked, instructs the ignorant, confirms the wavering, quickens the good, and comforts the afflicted. He labors to awaken those that sleep, to lead those whom God hath already awakened to the fountain open for sin and uncleanliness, that they may wash therein and be clean, and to stir up those who are saved through faith, to adorn the gospel of Christ in all things. I want to remind you a third time, we're talking about the almost Christian. He that hath form of godliness uses also the means of grace, yea, all of them, and all opportunities. He constantly frequents the house of God. When he approaches the table of the Lord, it is not with a light or careless behavior, with an air of gesture and deportment which speaks nothing else but, God be merciful to me, a sinner. To this, if we add the constant use of family prayer by those who are masters of families, and setting times apart for private addresses to God, with a daily seriousness of behavior, he who uniformly practices this outward religion has the form of godliness. There needs but one thing more in order to his being almost a Christian, and that is sincerity. By sincerity, I mean a real inward principle of religion, from whence these outward actions flow. And indeed, if we have not this, we have not the heathen honesty. No, not so much of it as will answer the demand of the heathen Epicurean poet. Even this poor wretch, in his sober intervals, is able to testify. Oh, we got Latin here. Oberant peccare boni virtuis amore. Oberant peccare mali formidine poene. I'm sure Latin scholars will be laughing at my butchering that Latin. What it means is, good men avoid sin for the love of virtue. Wicked men avoid sin from a fear of punishment. So that if a man only abstains from doing evil in order to avoid punishment, he's talking about all the things that we see a person being. They follow the Bible. They don't curse. They don't gossip. They go to church. They're honest. All of these things. And he's saying they're not a Christian, or they're almost a Christian. They're no better than the heathen who does all those things. That heathen, and in Wesley's parlance, is also an almost Christian. He goes on to say now what it is to be altogether a Christian. Obviously, he talks about Christ is your all in all. You live to serve Christ. You live to serve God. You are consumed by the knowledge of Christ. You know you are saved because of Christ coming to earth, becoming a man, dying on the cross to pay for your sins, and rising from the dead, thereby conquering death for all. But there is one other thing he talks about. And I suspect that every minister in existence at some point has talked about this sermon as a way of admonishing his flock, his congregation. I have done this. There was a time when an outward semblance of a perfect Christian member of my church, a pillar in the church, a person people looked up to. If I had not been a Methodist, he would have been, if we were Baptist, he would have been a deacon in the church. One of the things about being a minister, you would think people hide things from you, their real beliefs, their real opinion. They don't, because they know you're going to love them anyway. We have a window into people's lives that is scary sometimes. And this pillar, one day, was bad-mouthing one of my poorest families in my church, because they bought a 10-year-old, it was a Chevy, they have a large family, and it was a Suburban, 10 years old. I wouldn't spend my money on that if I was at blah, 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 blah. And I got angrier and angrier. He didn't know that. I did not show that. Because of all of the people in my church, in that community, that poor family, dirt poor, were some of the best Christians I had ever met in my life. So this pillar did all these things to be a very, very good, almost Christian. This pillar in my church did none of those things that arrogant and condescending people or not Christians do. And yet he was the epitome of an almost Christian. He had the absolute belief in his salvation through Christ. For him, Christ was his all in all. But what he didn't have, which is the key, that if you read the sermon, you will see Wesley talking about, is another thing, to be altogether a Christian. He did not have unconditional love for his fellow human beings. John Wesley is famous for saying that works are only evidence of. Works will gain you nothing. And he touched on that. Will gain you nothing if you're just doing it for reward here on earth. They're hollow works. But works are evidence. They are evidence that you are an altogether Christian. And I will tell you how you know you're an altogether Christian. I will give you an example of a experience I had in that same town. I got a call from the chief of police. Pastor, we got this woman in a tent up at the park with the dog. She's a vagrant, basically, passing through. Now, since the Great Depression, that town had 2 or 3 camping spots in the public park, specifically so that vagrants moving through town, hobos, would have a place to stay if they had shelter. So I went up there and I talked to her, and she was walking across the country to highlight domestic abuse. She was unwashed. The dog would kill anybody that got near her. She needed somewhere decent to stay. The closest place where she could get services was about 70 miles away. I had a little Honda Civic, little car. I did not want to, but I was absolutely compelled to load that woman into my car, all her things, the dog who wanted to kill me, who sat in the back seat the whole ride, and drove her all the way down to South Sioux City. Made contact with a clergy in that community, which is a much larger community. The little place I was in had 1,100 people in it. South Sioux City maybe had 15,000. Found her some services that she needed. And then I drove home. My kindness was not me showing off. My kindness was because the Holy Spirit within me told me, you will. And I could not resist. The altogether Christian, their works are evidence that they are altogether Christian because they respond to the Lord. They do all of those great things, not because they want people to think about them positively. They do them because within them, the Spirit tells them, these are my children. Take care of them. Love them as I do. So to be an altogether Christian, obviously, you need to believe absolutely that salvation is through Jesus Christ. I will give another sermon a little while later where I'll talk about a time that Wesley, in a debate, just so you know, said yes, a heathen, a savage, having never heard the story of Christ, can be saved because that heathen responded to God within them. The key was having never heard the story of Christ. So there was a bit of unconditionalism in Wesley's mind and how you become saved, how you be an altogether Christian. The key, again, isn't just the knowledge that Christ is your all in all, the belief that Christ is your all in all, the absolute belief that it is through Christ that you are saved. But the key is how you treat your fellow human beings. Be an altogether Christian. Even if you're not, fake it until you make it. Because trust me, if you serve God in all things, eventually you're going to know God. And eventually you will find yourself responding to being compelled to take a dirty woman with her dirty, flea-ridden dog, put him in your tiny little car, and drive them 70 miles so they can get the help that they need. And you're glad of it. Have a great day.